you can think that you've prepared yourself the best you can, but there's really no way to fully prepare your bag. As you're adjusting to it, you can have leaks. You have to learn how to change it, how to empty it. And there are people in the hospital that teach you that. But once you're home and you're on your own doing it for yourself, it hits you that, oh, this is forever. My ostomy is permanent and this is going to be with me forever. So my name is Dana. I live in Southeast Texas and I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease in 2010. I'd say my journey with Crohn's has been a roller coaster. It's been trial and error, different medications, treatment options, surgeries, all of the above. In 2010, I had actually just gotten my wisdom teeth removed, so I had surgery for that. And after that, I started experiencing these really weird GI symptoms. We thought I might have just had a stomach bug that included diarrhea, nausea, all of those things. But it continued on and it lasted for a month. And then I started getting symptoms like bleeding, severe weight loss. I lost 30 pounds within a month. And so we knew something was wrong. Probably waited a little bit too long to see a doctor, but I just had gone to my standard primary care doctor and she was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I know what this is. I'm going to set you up with a gastroenterologist. I went and saw her and she pretty much immediately had a feeling it was Crohn's based on my symptoms. She admitted me to the hospital because I was severely anemic, so I had to get a blood transfusion, and then they did a colonoscopy to confirm that it was Crohn's. I had never been hospitalized, never had any procedures, blood work, anything like that, so it was pretty scary, especially being in the hospital, getting a colonoscopy. They did thankfully put me all the way to sleep since I was so young and so sick. So I was under general anesthesia. I had to get an NG tube to get the bowel prep, which was pretty traumatic. That as a 15-year-old especially, that was very unpleasant and pretty scary. So all of that at such a young age was a little rough. So when I woke up from the colonoscopy back in my hospital room, they pretty much knew just based on the way my colon looked that it was Crohn's, but they did have to take biopsies to send them off to confirm that it was. So I got the official diagnosis a few weeks after that. I was a little bit relieved just to have answers of what was going on. At the time, they made it sound like, oh, this can get pretty easily under control by taking certain medications. So as a child, you think, okay, I can just take a medication. I'll get back on the boat to recovery, not really knowing the extent of what the future would be like. I had a family friend who had an ostomy bag, and I remember, being a teenager, I remember thinking, I am never going to let my disease get to that point where I'm going to need an ostomy. I can't picture my life with that. I'm not going to let that happen. And it just goes to show that you can try everything. You can, take the most precautions. You can try every medication, diet, anything like that. And you don't ultimately have control over what's going to happen. And you just kind of have to roll with the punches. The typical first step when you're first diagnosed is always a corticosteroid. So you take that, that kind of calms things down pretty quickly, but that's not a long-term treatment option. So I was put on a few immunosuppressant medications that were oral. They didn't really do a whole lot as that went on, and they didn't find a lot of progress in my disease. I started some more intense IV medications. The first one I was on worked really well, actually. It put me in remission for a good probably 3 or 4 years. I did start having a pretty severe skin reaction to that, so I had to come off of it. But since I was in remission, they thought, you're doing really well. You might be okay to come off of it just for now until we can kind of brainstorm some things. And within about 2 weeks of stopping that, I started flaring severely, like within 2 weeks. So when I was on that first medication that worked really well for me, I have what is called stricturing disease. So as the intestines heal after inflammation, they can become narrow and that can scar over. So after, being on this medication for a little while, that started to happen. My intestines were healing, but they were scarred and there was an area of fibrosis that they couldn't reverse. So I had my first colon resection in 2014, where they just cut out a segment of my descending colon. So then they tried a new biologic. It was pretty new at the time, another IV medication. I stayed on that for probably a year or two, and it just was not working as well as they hoped it would be. So got off of that, switched to a different medication. This time it was an injection. So I could do it at home, which was a lot more convenient. But that eventually stopped working as well. And I was having some other skin reactions to that. So that's 3 of these medications kind of, came and went. I started another one that was a little bit newer as well for Crohn's, and it was another injection. That one did not work at all. And this is kind of when my symptoms really started to become out of control. We just couldn't figure out how to get things calmed back down. I ended up going to Mayo Clinic just because I had some really severe perianal symptoms that my GI couldn't figure out. We went to Mayo Clinic and they recommended a different biologic that was more similar to the first one I had taken, just because that one worked so well for me. So they thought, this is a similar mechanism to that first medication that worked really well. So we're going to try that. That was another injection. Still didn't work very well for me. I had this fibrosis essentially pretty much all throughout my colon, rectum, and it was having a really hard time passing anything through. So my GI did a colonoscopy, was like, hey, it's not looking good. We could barely get in there because it was so narrow. And that's when she recommended ostomy surgery. So my gastroenterologist did a colonoscopy. It was pretty routine. I had them about once a year or so. So I initially was going to get a colostomy, which is where they cut out part of your colon, but then they use the colon to come out of your stomach and create the stoma, which then goes into the ostomy bag. Since I had inflammation all throughout my colon, even though the rest of my colon wasn't strictured and scarred, the likelihood of it coming back in the rest of my colon was pretty high just because there was inflammation there. So we just decided to take out the entire colon and do what's called an ileostomy, which is the end of the small intestine coming out. So I had the whole colon and rectum removed, and then an ileostomy was created, which is part of the ileum. I had my ileostomy surgery. It was kind of, I took some time to mentally prepare. I did a lot of research. I watched, videos from other people who had ostomies, and I really just made sure that I was prepared the best I could. So I was so sick before that I was really just ready for this surgery. I was ready to get it over with. And I also had, like I mentioned, the proctocolectomy. So procto is the rectum being removed. So people, have this removed because there's perianal disease, there's damage in that area at the end of your intestines. And for me, they had to cut out a lot of tissue because there was a lot of damage both in the skin and the rectal area. And because of that, once they cut that out, there wouldn't be any support there for my pelvic floor. So they had to take I call it my 6-pack muscle. So the left side of the rectus abdominis muscle, they cut that out, reconstructed my pelvis, basically sewed that in to create a new pelvic floor. And that part was definitely the scariest for me for surgery. My surgeon had very strict rules. So I was not allowed to sit up for 2 months, so 8 weeks. I had to either lay flat or stand. I couldn't sit, and the movement restrictions were very particular. So I was very nervous waking up from that surgery that I was going to do something wrong and hurt something. So that was pretty scary. I wasn't quite ready to look at it yet just because it's such a big change. Something, you see part of your intestine coming out of you, and it's kind of scary. So I waited a little while, and then I finally, looked at it. I saw it. I was like, okay, that's not so bad. And I immediately just kind of was relieved. All of this pain that I had previously, of course, you have surgery pain, but the Crohn's pain that I was experiencing beforehand was pretty much gone. And that was a strange feeling to experience, that it's, this pain you've had for years has just been magically relieved. You can think that you've prepared yourself the best you can, but there's really no way to fully prepare your bag. As you're adjusting to it, you can have leaks. You have to learn how to change it, how to empty it. And there are people in the hospital that teach you that. But once you're home and you're on your own doing it for yourself, it hits you that, oh, this is forever. My ostomy is permanent, and this is going to be with me forever. There's no going back to the way things were. And that took a lot of adjusting. I would say that first year was just the hardest, trying to mentally accept that. I think the worst challenge has probably been finding the supplies that work best for my body to prevent leaks, to make sure that my skin is okay. I was having reactions to certain adhesives from different products, and so my skin, there was a period of time where it was just very irritated. It was painful. The bags don't stick when that happens, so you have to try and heal the skin while keeping the bags on you, because you can't go without a bag. Like, especially having an ileostomy, like the output just comes out whenever it wants to. So trying to navigate all of that was definitely the biggest challenge, and it's still a challenge to this day. Something can work for a while, and then suddenly your body changes. You might gain weight, you might lose weight, you might start reacting to a product, and you have to re-navigate that all over again. They definitely warned me before the surgery that this could affect fertility. Right now I'm on a medication where it's not safe to take, while you are pregnant. So at the moment that is on hold, but it is still possible. There are people who have had the surgery who are able to have kids, and there are some people who can't. It kind of just depends how your body heals, how it scars, that kind of thing. Yeah, so I am taking two medications. One is oral, one is an injection, and my doctor kind of wanted to combine these two to give me the best possible outcome, because my Crohn's has been so difficult, and I've been through pretty much every medication that is out there currently. So these are kind of the last two options right now until they, come out with the next thing. But this combination seems to actually really be working, and I haven't really been this stable in probably about 7 years. The one thing that I miss from my old self is being able to be spontaneous, having that spontaneity. Especially having an ostomy now, you really have to plan ahead. You have to make sure you have all your supplies with you at all times, just in case something happens. You have to make sure you're going somewhere that has restrooms available, or, just the accommodations for your disease need to be in place, and you really have to plan ahead. And I miss kind of just being able to go out and do whatever you want without thinking about it. If you're new to having an ostomy, I would say my biggest tip is find a community, find other people that are going through the same thing as you, whether that's online, on social media. Most cities have support groups where you can connect with people. I think that's the biggest thing that helped get me through. And I think I recommend that for everybody because it can be really lonely and isolating. And so connecting with others who understand is really important. So there was a point where I really did need to seek some help, especially at my sickest times. It can just be really, lonely and kind of hard, depressing at times to feel like you're so sick and you just can't participate in the things that everyone around you is doing. So, I reached out to my doctor at one point. I got some help. I got some medication, starting therapy. All of those things can be really helpful when you're feeling isolated. It's going to be okay. You can get back to a normal life. You can do all the fun things. You can wear whatever clothes you want. This isn't going to take your life away from you. It's only going to, in most cases, add to your life because a lot of times these people are so sick and struggling and their ostomies are giving them their life back. So I just want to be able to show people who might be going through this surgery, whether it's unplanned or unexpected, to realize and to see that things are going to be okay. I met my husband, excuse me, when I was relatively stable in my disease. So he witnessed me go from stable to being really sick. We got married. I was pretty stable still. And then almost immediately after we got married, I got very sick. So when I had my ostomy surgery, we were already married. So he was able to see the ostomy give me my life back. He was so on board for it just because he saw how miserable and sick I was. And it was affecting him too, because we weren't able to go out and do things. It affected intimacy. I was in a lot of pain a lot of times. So, we weren't able to just do normal couple things. And then I got my ostomy, and that definitely changed the way we were able to function in life. I would say it made our relationship stronger. Um, in regard to things like intimacy, you just find your new normal. You might have to adjust certain things, clothing. I have a lot of different bag covers that you can experiment, and you'll find your new normal. It just takes a little bit of practice, but you'll get there. It's going to be okay. Um, there are going to be times where you feel really hopeless, when the medications stop working, when you feel like you've tried everything and you have to get a surgery that feels really scary. It's going to be okay. And especially if you just keep that mindset, that positive mindset, and connect with others. Don't isolate yourself. Really build connection, and you're going to find some beautiful things in life.